I suppose my journey with food started long before the olive grove. As you can see, I've obviously been a greedy guts all through my life. And recipes are what I tend to go for. Certainly in the press these days when it's boring politics, recipes. It's great. I don't do TV. I'm not a TV, cookery program person where you sit there and then ring deliverance for your dinner or Domino pizza. But I like reading about it because you can salivate about what they're talking about. And that started with the great Elizabeth David 150 years ago, And I've noticed that now writers about food get ever more exotic. You've got to find the more exotic ingredient. Things like za'atar from wherever it comes in the Middle East, or nampla sauce. Nampla sauce from fish sauce. Doesn't tell you what the fish sauce is made of, and I'm allergic to oysters, alas. So I don't use nampla because God knows what goes into it. Herbs, they're getting very exotic about herbs. Vietnamese basil, all that sort of, gosh, we're going to go around the world, we're going to be really exotic, we're going to be really particular about our ingredients. And then comes the killer for me, olive oil. Just olive oil. 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. Sometimes they mention extra virgin olive oil. I don't know, any of you shop at Waitrose. They produce seasonal booklets which are mostly about vegetables. And the recent one that's come out telling us all about autumn vegetables, they go olive oil, sometimes extra virgin, sometimes organic extra virgin. There's an improvement. But nobody's editing this. It's just olive oil, olive oil, olive oil. And food writers are now falling off their pantheon of reasonableness for me. One I thought was a terrific cook actually said, he fell from grace about 4 years ago, he said, it doesn't matter what olive oil, they're all the same. There's too much fuss about oil. They are all the same. And I won't say who he was on this mic, but you can come and find out from me personally. Because food writers are actually very vindictive when you say to them, excuse me, but you don't actually know what you're talking about. I actually challenged one who was reviewing a restaurant, it was an Italian restaurant, and he went on and on and on about how wonderful the something or other and the polpettini and the, così cosa was. But what a pity they called their baby marrows zucchini and not courgettes. And I wrote to him and said, you are a wally. It's an Italian restaurant, and zucchini is the Italian name for zucchini, not courgettes. And I got a blast, such rudeness. How dare you? Everybody knows that courgettes are the common name for baby marrows. I thought, right, you're off the list. Olive oil. There is one food writer who is absolutely, late Marcella Hazan was the goddess of writing about Italian cooking. She didn't do Italian cooking this year, and next year I'm going to be an expert on Serbo-Croat cooking, and next year, you know what they are like. They've got to have a new and wonderful focus. She said, quite simply, the choice of olive oil is extremely important because a good olive oil will raise the tone of even the worst ingredients. It'll raise the level of the worst ingredients. But a bad olive oil will wreck the finest. The bad olive oil will wreck the finest. If you come down to stand 62, I'll give you a sniff of something absolutely hair-raisingly disgusting, which is sold in every supermarket as extra virgin olive oil. I won't say who on the mic, but I'll tell you. Now, there are two issues on olive oil. First is, what kind of olive oil? Now, in your kitchens, do you have salt, pepper? Maybe you have white pepper and black pepper. Maybe you have Szechuan pepper. Do you have basil, thyme, sage? What else? The choice of herbs that you might put in your dish. Do you have French mustard, and do you have English mustard, and do you have Dijon mustard, and do you have something else? There are 700 varieties of olive. They all make different kinds of oil. They make different kinds of oil. In fact, if you have as we have, a grove up the mountain and a grove at sea level, it tastes quite different. You can have heavy, green, peppery, light olive oils. You use them with your dish according to your dish. Let's go back to Marcella Hazan. She was doing some sort of roast beef dish, and she said, for this, you need the pepperiest Sicilian, heavy Sicilian olive oil that you can find. Now, there is an instruction. different oils for different foods. And I mentioned ours, Abergavenny, which is very, very light and has an after finish at the back of the throat. You use it for fine vegetables, fine salads. And then another one, which is at sea level, very beefy, comes and hits you in your face, says, hello, darling, pour me all over yourself, all over your tomato salads. And we have a blend for every day. Actually, just thinking about this, another thing about olive oil and cookery writers, you can't cook with olive oil, which of course comes as amazing information to people in the Mediterranean area who have been cooking with it for thousands of years. You can't cook with olive oil, says the Daily Telegraph last week in response to some scare thing from Spain, which says the olive oil is going to be expensive. You can't cook with extra virgin olive oil. Funnily enough, I fry eggs in mine every morning. We roast potatoes in it. We make ratatouille with it. It's absolutely delicious. And if you go to Crete, every single dish they provide is swimming in olive oil. And of course, the more I read about cookery writers, from cookery writers, the more you actually realise they don't know anything, or very much, about what they're writing. The choice of ingredients. What were you mentioning? Dexter's, or is this Aberdeen Angus beef? Is it a Gloucester Old Spot? Is it a Tamworth? You know, all that, they don't know. It's just meat. 1 pound of steak. Okay. 1 pound of steak. Cut the fat off? What do you do with it? They just about manage to say black or white pepper, but not very often. It's usually add pepper. Sometimes they manage to say wine vinegar as opposed to sarsens. Sometimes. Sometimes it might be nice to have a dish with cider vinegar, but they don't mention that. And also they don't make it their business to know how food is produced, how it's farmed, and what makes a good product. For example, I cooked a dish last night, which I thought, from a food writer who I adore, I thought it would be really wonderful. And it had soy sauce in it. And having made it precisely to her specifications, I realised the soy sauce should have been mentioned as light soy sauce, because it was so bloody salty, we couldn't manage it. And then she wanted to have 3 tablespoons of honey put in, which would have made it complete. I mean, you know, well, let's get this right. So I have to doctor everything that I read from a food writer. It's never actually right. But let me just finish off on olive oil, because it's a bit of a rant. This olive oil is a fruit juice. It has to be fresh. Extra virgin olive oil is nothing to do with the label that big supermarket people put on their bottle. Extra virgin olive oil is more than an indication of acidity per volume. Olive oil has to be fresh. It's got to smell good. It's got to taste good. It's got to feel good on the mouth. It's got to be young. It's got to be of this season, because olive oil does lose its nutrients and goes off as it goes old. The taste might not go off, but the actual sort of nutrients of it does sort of wear off. And really a good cook should have a battery of olive oils. You should have a light one. You should have a beefy one. You should have a really heavy one for some dish which is going to hit you in the face. If you're going to use heavy spices or peppers or chilies, as they do in the south of Italy, you want something that's going to be able to carry that. You know. So why don't olive oil writers, food writers, know about these? Because they're so busy writing their next article or their next television show. They don't keep their eye open, for example, on the food stories. Who broke the stories about horse meat? Not a food writer. Who reads the reports and the reviews about the food that is produced for us? That article about not frying with olive oil in the Telegraph was written by a staffer of some kind who wrote such utter rubbish you thought you don't even know how to research it. Now, olive oil is one of the most adulterated, fraudulent foodstuffs in the world, and the fraud and the adulteration and the scandals are centuries old. There is a cuneiform tablet dated 3,500 BC which says, "Beware the nefarious practices of the olive oil dealer." I've just come back from Australia, where there's a major hoo-ha going on about bad olive oil. All over the press, everybody knows about it. Didn't meet a food writer who knew about it, but I expect they probably do. And I followed this up by looking on the net for evidence. There was a report written in 2011 by the University of California's outpost in Davis, which analysed over 100 plus labels of olive oil that were available in the supermarkets. They did it because the Californian and the Australian olive oil producers were saying to their governments, why are you letting all this garbage come into us from Europe? Because we make extra fine olive oil. And of the 100 plus, I think about 117 plus commercial labels, 70%, 70% failed the test, including the most famous brands, including the brands that you see on every supermarket shelf right now here in the UK. And I've got one on my stand, on stand 62. You can go and smell it. Failed on every single count of extra virgin olive oil. They may have been under 0.8% oleic acid, but how they got to that level is another matter. Was it adulterated? Was it filtered with something else? Was it mixed? All of them failed on taste, and all of them failed on provenance, and all of them failed on suitability for cooking. And there is one other thing when you go back to this word olive oil, just plain olive oil. That's been extracted from the rubbish and the detritus of milling olives, and the oil comes from that rubbish. It's extracted by chemical. And when the chemicals evaporated off, you get a black sludge, really horrible black sludge, like you can imagine coming out of a dry cleaner. The chemical's the same. And that has to be deodorized and pasteurized and bleached and this and that and the other and so forth, and it goes through about 16 different processes, after which it has a stabilizer added to it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, goes into all sorts of products as just plain olive oil or refined olive oil. And quite a lot of those products are health products. Your light, no-fat olive oil product. It has exactly the same calories as extra virgin, and it is completely and utterly no value whatsoever. And if you put it in your mouth, you're a much better person than I, Gangadin. It's extracted from the sludge of the detritus of olive oils, milling with chemicals. And as far as from healthy fruit juice, which is what olive oil is, that you can possibly imagine. Come and try it. Stand 62.